today we're going to be continuing on our line of what happens after your teenager gets into an accident. Okay, so what happens we talked about the property damage claim, we talked about how you need to call the insurance and all those types of things. Today we're going to be talking about kind of what I do in my everyday job is the personal injury claim. All right, and so this one is not fun for anybody involved because there's typically an injury. Sometimes they're horrific injuries, sometimes they're minor injuries. Sometimes they're injuries that people don't even know develop yet because it takes a couple weeks for those injuries to set in. Whiplash is an example of something like that. So basically, after you've contacted you get into the accident, your child does, they call 911. If they need to be taken off into an ambulance, that's step one. God forbid that never happens, but it does. And so, you want to make sure that you're the emergency contact and people reach out to you as the parent. And then next from there, you want to make sure that the teen continues along with their treatment. Even if they're not necessarily, hurt right away. And I remember being a tough 18-year-old and saying, oh, nothing's going to bother me or nothing's going to do this, that, or the other. Where one time I got hit in the face with a soccer ball as I was playing, and it ricocheted my head back and forth so hard that the following day I had to be brought to the emergency room, and I actually got whiplash from being hit in the head with a soccer ball. And it sounds really funny, but it was quite possibly one of the most painful things that I've ever been through in my life because it was, a situation where I'd never felt that pain before. And it took a little while for it to set in. And so I was very lucky that incident just happened, and 2 or 3 days later I was totally fine. But I did have to go to the ER, and they did have to do x-rays and everything like that, and then I was able to bounce back from it just fine. But not everybody in most accidents are that lucky. And so what needs to happen there is you go to the doctor and you do everything the doctors say. And so that is what we call the treatment phase, okay? And so you can retain a lawyer during that phase. It's always best to get the lawyer retained early on so that they can gather all the insurance documents and police reports and videos and all that stuff. But the most important thing anyone can do is go to the doctor, okay? And so you go to the doctor and you treat with the doctor and you do everything the doctor says until you get yourself back to 100% or as close to 100% as possible from the accident, the minute before the accident happened. And so once that happens, then after treatment phase comes, that's when the lawyers start gathering all the doctor's records and the documents. And that's when it's quite a detailed process, and we have many issues with medical providers trying to get the documented records because you want to make sure that all the medical providers are paid in full. And that's something that you are due under the insurance of the at-fault driver, that the medical records are paid dollar for dollar in full. So that is something that's very important because you don't want to potentially settle with an insurance company and then 4 or 5, 6 months later you get a bill saying that the medical provider was not paid. And so that's part of our job, is to make sure that all the bills are paid. And so after the treatment happens and then after the medical records are gathered, you want to put together what's called a demand letter. And in Louisiana, we only have 1 year for this whole thing to happen and settle the case. And so if you end up going past that 1 year mark, then you have to file a lawsuit to preserve your rights. Otherwise, you have no claim. And so a lot of insurance companies like to slow pay and low pay until they get to that point, and then they run away laughing, saying, "Haha, we got you." So after you treat and after you gather your records, you send a demand letter and you work on the claim with the other side. And so this is how it happens until the potential for the need to file a suit. And then if you end up having to file a lawsuit, it's the same process. You're just doing that to preserve that right, and so you keep your rights alive. And I know this is a long video, but this might be the shortest synopsis of how to do a personal injury claim that I've ever gone over. But it's extremely important because there's lots of exposure there for you, or you could potentially be leaving a lot of things on the table. The last thing you want are unpaid medical bills, And then you also want to make sure that your teen is compensated for their pain and suffering. And so this is, the amount of money and the amount of time that they treated. The law allows for compensation for pain and suffering, because had they not been in that accident, then they would not have had to go through all this and deal with all this. And I know teenagers are very active, and it's just one of those things where it's hard on them to be injured and continue their same quality of life. So pain and suffering is real. And then with teens, a lot of times you can get future medicals if there's any kind of permanent damage to the teen, and a laundry list of other things, potential lost wages if they couldn't work during the time period as well. But again, I'll go into each of those segments a little bit more in detail in some of the following videos, but I wanted to give like an overview, especially if you have a small claim, you might be able to handle this on your own. And if you ever have any questions on, how to handle a claim on your own or do anything like that, I'm more than happy to help with that. So direct message me, or leave a comment here, and we can get in touch, and I'll look at everything and try to give you the best advice that I can for you moving forward. So again, Seth Smiley with the Smiley Law Firm, and this is another edition of Parents of Teen Drivers Facebook group, and that was probably the shortest synopsis of how to handle a personal injury claim possible. And there are definitely things that I left out, because there's a lot of fine points and lots of I's to dot and T's to cross. But that's what lawyers are here for, and we want to make sure that everybody gets treated fairly, and the insurance companies aren't going to get one over on you. So thank you very much for this, and feel free to leave any comments below.